What you are listening to is real. The participants are not actors. They are actual litigants with a case pending in the squared circle. Both parties have agreed to dismiss their cases and have their disputes settled here in our forum, the Turnbuckle Debate.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Turnbuckle Debate. My name is Sneed.
I'm Chad.
I'm Tom, the OG Fig Kid, the staple of the Turnbuckle Debate.
And we have a special guest joining us for our 1-year anniversary. We have the co-host of the Jim Norton and Sam Roberts show on Sirius XM, Mr. Sam Roberts. What's going on, man?
How are you? Thanks for having me. And cast member of WWE's The Ultimate Show on Peacock.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I didn't want to go through the whole rundown. I wanted to let you get your rundown in, man.
Sometimes I just think of like one show. I'm like, which is the show that I'll plug this time?
Yeah. Hey, well, you can plug them all on here, man. We don't care.
Well, thanks for
That's a
having
good
me.
problem to have.
Good. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on a year. That's huge.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man. We
Thank you,
appreciate
man.
it. It's and we wanted to bring a really special guest on, so we're pumped to have you on. We have 3 great topics to get into. So what we're going to do, we have 3 topics. We'll get into it. We have normally we do about
15 minutes.
15 minutes on each topic. We'll give a countdown if Tom keeps going, if Tom runs too long. So sometimes
Cut him off.
Sometimes we got to cut him off.
It's like the Gong Show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But if you guys are ready,
Yeah.
I mean, are you guys ready to get into it, Tom?
Let's do it.
You ready?
Do it.
Let's go. All right. So our first topic of the evening. Will the WWE releases of the last 2 years have any lasting effects on the company, or is it just business as usual? And we know we've had a lot of releases over the past couple of years, and we've seen a laundry list of names. So
Big names.
Yeah.
Some big names. Shocking names.
Yep.
I mean, for WWE, I believe it's going to be business as normal, the way they're going to approach everything. But as fans, we see these guys like Malachi Black, wherever Bray Wyatt winds up, all these names they let go that are choo-choo stars. We're going to be like, wow, they could have still been in WWE, and they're not there. The ratings, are a little lower for everything, but I just wonder how it's going to affect them. The rumors of Fox getting mad at them for not trying to get Punk over there. What's going to happen when they go to renegotiate a deal when their contracts are up with USA and Fox. Time will tell. Time will definitely tell. I think it will. I think it's going to affect them somehow. But they're such a well-oiled machine with what they do. They're just going to move on.
Yeah,
Like it's nothing.
that's kind of, it's hard to say it's going to affect such a global behemoth as WWE. I mean, they're such a mainstay. They're making money hand over fist. I guess my only worry about it affecting the product is more of the psyche of the wrestlers themselves. Like when you have young guys who maybe don't fit that stereotypical Vince idea of what a wrestler is, are they going to be hesitant to sign with a company like WWE thinking, well, what if they don't use me right? Or what if they cut me? So, it's like Rome wasn't built in a day and Rome didn't fall in a day either. So I'm wondering if things like this work their way into the psyche of wrestlers and we see a slow erosion over time if they don't course correct.
I think that I think you have to look at it from a real macro perspective, like way back, go way, zoom all the way out and look at it from the top and go like, okay, what is the real effect here? Because the reason I think why every set of talent releases has been shocking is not just because of the names, but because this wasn't necessarily business as usual for a period of time. The WWE went through several years where they weren't releasing anybody ever.
Right.
And now that about face has been made for whatever reasons, who knows? In terms of WWE's business, no, I don't think I don't think it'll have a negative effect, because part of what happens when you don't release people is you end up with just a mass of talent like the WWE's never seen. So for every person that gets released, there's still, I mean, look at the roster as it stands. Like, you've still got Roman and Drew and Bobby and Rollins and Becky and Charlotte, and like, there's just stars and stars and stars. Kevin Owens is back in the main event scene. Rey Mysterio is still there. Like, it's just stars and stars and stars and stars. So on that level, it won't affect WWE, I don't think, because they've just got so much talent there. But I think when you look at it from an industry perspective, what it does is it brings us back to a place where there are wrestlers that are moving from roster to roster and company to company. And we are seeing, like, oh, this person didn't work here, but now he is working there. And I think that what you're going to end up seeing is wrestlers maybe less worried about getting released, because people who do get released have these careers outside. So that maybe that means wrestlers take more chances. Maybe that means as more wrestlers get released, more talent becomes available to other companies. Those talent go to those companies. Those companies put out this amazing product, which then pushes WWE to put out an even better product. So what you have is something that could, and I'm an optimist, I'm a fan, this is my kind of my thing, but it could end up being very healthy for the industry as a whole, which I believe that the industry is healthy. WWE will continue to be kind of the top rung of the industry and thus be healthy in itself.
I agree with that. I think that for so long we didn't have all the talent. When they got cut, there was nowhere to go. They didn't have a place to go. But now with so many different companies, I mean, you have not anymore. You have Impact, AEW, NWA. I mean, there's MLW. There's so many places they can go. And I think you're right. I think the talent, they're not going to have that worry about getting released. And it is going to create a lot more competition that's going to be to drive everybody.
And I think as AEW gets stronger, and also it's like, you've got people that maybe wouldn't have been a main event person in WWE or wouldn't have wrestled the style that you want to see them wrestle in WWE, and they go elsewhere and you can see them wrestle that style and they do become that main eventer. And so it's like, as these other companies become healthier, opportunities just pop up everywhere. And all of a sudden you've got all these opportunities for all these different people to make impacts in a spot like Impact. Right? Like you've got stuff all over the place. And, I think all those ships float a lot higher when the tide is high.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that old cliche, rising tides,
That's
sure.
That's the one.
But I wonder about a guy like, Killer Cross, whatever you want to call him. Do you think that hampers the indie guy from coming to the WWE now? Seeing he was successful in NXT, he had the same gimmick he did on the indies, and he gets to the main roster and they're trying to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't work. Do you think that's going to hold people back from wanting to go there? Or do you think their dream is, hey, I still want to go and take a shot in WWE?
I think WWE will always be a dream for people. Like I still feel like that's the majors. People still look at that. And I think NXT, that problem of them being treated one way in NXT and then utilized the wrong way on the main roster, I think that's the whole shakeup with NXT 2.0. I don't think we're going to see that anymore. I think those days are, unfortunately, I love the black and gold brand, but I think the whole revamp of NXT 2.0 was to make it more streamlined, where the people they're building on that show now will be the people that are coming to the main roster instead of completely altering a gimmick.
And there's a couple things there too, right? It's like, number one, I don't think that anybody who wants to go to WWE won't go to WWE because they think that they won't be successful. Some people don't want to go to WWE, and that's cool. And some people do want to go to WWE, and that's what they work towards, and either it works out or it doesn't. But I do think that if you're a wrestler and you want to go to WWE and you get offered the opportunity to go to WWE and you don't take it because you think that you won't succeed in WWE, then you probably wouldn't have succeeded in WWE.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes when you walk in with a mindset of, oh, I don't know, I saw other people, it didn't work out for them, so I don't think it's going to work out for me. You're probably right.
And I think
No.
I think wrestlers have that mentality that is very similar to like boxers or MMA fighters, where every guy, the low-level guys who enter those sports, they believe that one day they're going to be champion. So wrestlers, when you tell them like, oh, you know, you're going to get misused on the main roster, I don't think wrestlers think like that. I think they think more like, no, I'll be able to get through. They'll see the stardom in me. You know what I mean? Like, I think they have
I'm the
that-
exception.
Yeah, I'm the exception. I can break through that glass ceiling. I think that's what makes wrestlers and fighters and those type of athletes unique, is because they have this just confidence in themselves.
Yeah, and they should. I mean, the amount of balls, for lack of a better term, it takes just to say, I'm one of the chosen few that's going to make a living being a professional wrestler. This is what I'm going to do with my life. Like, you know, the idea that you would have that mentality and then also go, but I don't think I'm going to succeed there. Like, you know, I would hope, I wouldn't be attracted to a mentality like that.
No.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
No, I think they definitely, you have to have that. I mean, for lack of a better word, blind confidence. You know, if you're not in it to become champion,
Why are you
in it? You know, if you're tiptoeing, like you're doomed before you even start.
Like they say, Ica Pro, you gotta want it.
Man, that's a threat. I haven't heard that in a long time.
That's so true.
Oh,
So do you
man.
guys think, like, this is kind of branching off a little bit, but do you guys think that some of these releases maybe are, I've always thought that it's a silver lining for some of these guys.
Oh, 100%.
Like, you know,
Malachi Black.
Exactly. And not even the big guys like that, but I'm thinking of, you know, when AEW was just kind of in the early stages and WWE was kind of stockpiling that talent and giving those big contracts out, a lot of those guys were sitting in the back doing nothing. You know, at least now if they get cut, you know, nobody wants to lose their job, but at least now they can go out and ply their trade. So I think that's the silver lining for me is, you know, like Sam talked about, with the talent going out into the pro wrestling world outside of Stanford, it's going to elevate the entire industry of pro wrestling by spreading that wealth of talent around.
Well, even if they don't get picked up by a big company, the indies right now are huge. I mean, indies are huge right now.
Yeah.
So they're going to be, I mean, they're one, it raises their price tag. The indies are going to pay a lot to have them on their show, and it's going to elevate everybody on that show also.
And
I
by
think it's
and by raising their price tag on indies, it elevates the show, which essentially raises the price tag for the smaller indie
Right.
guys, because the shows are bringing in more money.
Yep.
So it's a trickle down effect.
And let's not forget, let's look at Drew McIntyre. He was released a few years ago,
Yep.
and he made it a point to go out and work his ass off to get back to WWE. He said it when he was released, and he went and proved it. And look, he's been world champion now. He's headlining shows. He's an imperfect example of what you could do if you do get released and you go work the indies or other promotions and you want to get back there.
And look at a guy like Cardona, who's reinventing the way we look at him on the independent scene.
Yeah, he's pretending to be a deathmatch wrestler now.
Yeah.
he's the deathmatch king, right?
Yeah,
Isn't
man.
that his thing?
Yeah.
That's what he's initiated and not initiated. He's anointed himself the
Anointed.
deathmatch king.
Yeah, him and Chelsea are taking GCW by storm now.
I mean, you talked about the indies being hot. GCW is doing the Hammerstein in January.
Yeah.
Insane.
Crazy.
Insane, man.
Awesome.
That is awesome. So good to see.
That promo that they did for that, the Hammerstein.
John Carlo.
Killing
So
it.
good, man.
All
Killing it.
All
right.
right, guys. Well, you want to move on to the next topic of the evening?
Let's do
All
it.
right, let's go. So our next topic of the evening, this could be a fun one. Just straight up, what's the best era of professional wrestling?
Such a subjective question.
And
You
are
know-
we talking our favorite, or are we talking what's the best? I mean, that's
Those two things kind of go hand in hand for me. Like,
I mean, I grew up and
True.
I still go back and watch stuff from the 80s more than I go back and watch the Attitude Era, but I love the Attitude Era. But I grew up in the 80s. I grew up watching Piper and Hogan. I'll go back and watch those Piper pits leading up to WrestleMania 3. Like every few months I go back and watch that stuff. So like, is it just because I was a kid that stood out to me? That's why I could go back to it so much. The Attitude Era was amazing.
That's the big thing
Yep.
is separating the nostalgia of it. Like I think everyone is prone to, you know, I grew up early the golden age, Hogan, Macho, all those guys, but then you really cut my teeth as a teenager during the Attitude Era. So immediately you're going to lean into that, but it's tough, man. What do you got, Tom? Do you have the golden era? Is that what you're going with?
It's so hard for me. I mean, I love what we're watching now. I feel we're going through an amazing era right now with what we're seeing in AEW. I love what Tony Khan's doing, poking WWE. Kind of reminds me of the beginning of the Monday Night Wars when, you know, first WWF wouldn't even acknowledge that there was WCW. And then they would slowly, you know, you started to see the Huckster and the Nacho Man. I think that was the first, you know, the shot they took back at them before DX took over. Like those were great times too. But you know, in my heart of hearts, I think I go back to the golden era. I think I do. I like seeing Hogan versus Andre as a kid, seeing Andre rip Hogan's shirt off. That still lives in my memory so strong. Like, so I think I would have to. I think if you put a gun to my head, I'm picking the golden era.
Yeah, I mean, the golden era is so important, right? Because, like, I mean, like the golden era and the Attitude Era both changed everything. Like the golden era made wrestling mainstream. It turned wrestling into a national and eventually a global platform. It ushered in the idea that wrestlers could be cartoon characters and put on lunch boxes, and you know that there was He-Man and Ninja Turtles and WWE. Like that was all because of Hogan and Andre and Piper and all those guys. And then the Attitude Era, I mean, talk about being a benchmark of like mid to late 90s culture, starting with the NWO and then into DX and Austin and Rock, and like literally creating stars that still to this day, I mean, The Rock's the biggest movie star in the world. But, you know, I mean, I do think that eras of wrestling are exactly the same as music and movies and TV. It's really whatever you watched as a kid, whatever you fell in love with the first time, that's what's going to be in the pocket. That's what's going to be in your heart. So like for me, I'm sitting here going like, well, obviously the Attitude Era is the Attitude Era. I mean, you could sit there, you could talk about what's going on now, the fact that there's all these organizations again. You could talk about ruthless aggression. I mean, the post Attitude Era was like so incredibly underrated, you know, in terms of just, you know, just the sheer star power walking in and like, you know, with John Cena and Randy Orton and Dave Bautista and Brock Lesnar are just all coming in all at once. Like, what an amazing time. But for me, because it was when I got like, I was really, when I sunk my teeth in probably the hardest would have been when I was like 10. That's usually when, you know, all of us are able to really latch on.
Yeah.
And for me, that puts me right at the new generation.
Hot take.
I love the new generation. I mean, and when you talk about like, what do you go back and watch? Man, when they put superstars, I got so pissed when the network or Peacock or whichever one it was added Wrestling Challenge, but it was Wrestling Challenge from the 80s. I was like,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, I want 92, 93. I want Doink. I want Papa Shango. I want Damian Demento. I want to see Sean and Brett. I want to see, yeah, because when you look at it, when you look at New Generation, and by the way, like people try to disrespect when we were running on Diesel Power, but I was running on Diesel Power. I love Diesel as champion. Diesel was my guy. But when you look at what mainstream wrestling is today, and when you look at what matches look like today, and when you look at that sort of athletic influence that is in those matches, the first time that we see that on a main event, mainstream level is the new generation, is like Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, not Survivor Series 97, but Survivor Series 92, and Bret versus Austin at Survivor Series 96, and Bret versus Hakushi at In Your House. I mean, it's a lot of Bret Hart matches, but all of that was going on. I think that while there was so much nonsense happening and just so much stuff being thrown at the wall to try to make it work, just under the surface, all these seeds were being planted for what the future of wrestling was going to look like. And if you go back and really look at new generation stuff, you can see the seeds being planted. And that's why, to me, it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I totally remember those days.
Oh, I love them.
Oh.
I love those days, man. The new gen era was, so good. I'm going to go a little bit different with mine. I'm going to say late 80s NWA, early 90s WCW, but definitely the Jim Crockett promotion days. That's, you had Four Horsemen, you had Midnight Express, you had all Magnum TA, like you had all these guys, and these are the guys that Jim Crockett pushed McMahon to make his product what it was. And I just think that era, which is what I grew up on living here in West Virginia, Jim Crockett, NWA, WCW, that was my favorite. And just seeing Flair and Arn and Tully and all these guys, Dusty. I think
again, how old were you then?
I was around 5 years old. 5, 6 years old, and that's when I remember going to house shows. The first thing I remember,
you had an older brother who
my brother would wear Rock and Roll Express tassels and bandanas around his leg. That's that's my earliest memories are him dressing up and my dad taking him to the house shows. Me not being able to go because I was so young, but still having a magazine slip to me and reading about everything that's going on. So I think that era for me, I think that's my favorite. And I think it's a very important one.
See, you almost took the words out of my mouth because I would lean into that too. Cause same for me. I love that time when NWA and WCW were kind of shaking hands. Like it was right when they were changing the names over. It was right kind of that era of Dangerous Alliance, like 91, 92 WCW, just Sting, Surfer Sting, all of that has a special place in my heart. But there's something about today's wrestling to me. Sure, WWE's product people can complain about here and there, but overall, if you just look at the era we are in right now, I'm having more fun as a wrestling fan. I'm trying to throw the nostalgia away because the nostalgia makes me want to say Attitude Era, but to throw away the nostalgia aspect of it, I guess being an older, educated fan, knowing that being more hip to the backstage elements, the news of the day with the releases and who's going to sign where, I'm having more fun as a pro wrestling fan right now than I ever have in my life. Just because when I was a kid, I have that just innocent love for wrestling. And there's something special about that, not knowing, but there's also something about just being so tapped into everything and having that 30 years of fandom and seeing it really in a golden age. There's so much good product out there, from the independents to the top tier companies. I think I'm going to go modern day, man. I'm having more fun as a wrestling fan right now than I ever have in my life.
I'm loving it. This is as much as I've loved it ever. I don't disagree with that. But Sam, I really popped when I added those Wrestling Challenge from the 80s on the network. So I was super happy to see that was those.
Yeah.
Well, I popped when Superstars from 92 came on.
Yeah, I watched those too.
I love that era too, though, man.
And the Monday Night Wars, man. Like, I know here's the thing about Attitude Era. I think a lot of people, when they talk about Attitude Era, they look at it with rose-colored glasses. But if you really go back and look at some of those shows, like any era, there's some pretty bad shit on in those shows where you're like, but if we could isolate the smaller eras within those big Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, like that, like 96 to 98 run of WCW with the cruiserweight division and the birth of NWO, that was so exciting. And then that run that WWE had when they finally started kind of taking over the war with the rise of Stone Cold, the McMahon feud, DX, those little like 2-3 year gaps in the bigger era of the Attitude Era, man, there's some special stuff in there, I think.
What about the Radicals showing up on Monday Night Raw?
Incredible.
That was the beginning of an awesome time too.
That run, the Edge run, that when he turned heel and he was on SmackDown, I think that was like post Attitude Era, maybe Ruthless Aggression. That whole run was incredible. So
it's just so fun, the roller coaster ride of that era, where it was like WWE, you had gone through this thing through the golden era, started to get shaky in the new generation, but where WWE was the kind of superpower of American wrestling, and WCW was like a distant second.
yeah,
So when that thing starts, and WCW not only starts catching up, but in terms of TV ratings and to a degree in terms of sort of national eyes and awareness, they start clobbering them, and WCW out of nowhere starts becoming the hip promotion, and watching it go like, I never thought this would happen. WCW becomes that promotion, and then less than 2 years later, WWE not only comes back and gets back on top of them, but
yeah.
beats their brains in and goes to a level that no other company had gone to. So like that, like roller coaster ride of watching like where this is going, and there was like smaller versions of that every single week. But when you look at that as a bigger story, like that's fun because it will never be duplicated. It just it can't be because of technology, because of even in a world where we've got another big national promotion, it's still like it's not the same, and it never like we'll never have that moment again. And for all of us, it's like I think that it holds an extra special place in our hearts because we get to live through it. Like we all know, like we all remember that roller coaster ride.
Sam, do you think WWE would be where they're at today if not for the wars? Like if the wars never happened, I feel like that is what propelled them. That like they needed that to get to where they are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think that they would be at all. Like I think that they needed a kick in the butt. Like, it was comfortable at the top, and they hadn't changed with the times. They were still kind of treading water there and trying to use the same philosophies that they used in the golden era, but without a superstar like Hulk Hogan. And you needed, like, Hulk Hogan was essential to that time. So yeah, I think it was WCW trying something that was so much more reality based that hadn't really been done on a mainstream level in America in a long time. And WWE realizing like, oh, people's sensibilities are changing. And then WWE taking talent that had been underutilized in WCW, like Steve Austin, Jericho, and the Radicals, and like realizing what we've got here. And at the same time, people poo-poo this idea of WWE just getting athletes and making superstars from scratch. But when you look, even they started doing that in the Attitude Era. And when you look at their track record, some of the biggest successes in wrestling have come from just WWE finding athletes and teaching them how to go. The Rock,
Kurt Angle.
I mean, like those aren't professional wrestlers until they walk into a warehouse in Stanford and Dr. Tom and Pat Patterson start showing them what to do.
Yeah.
So, and I think that in that because all that was going on, when you're that far behind, you can try things. And I think that's what WWE was doing. They were trying things, and they stumbled upon a few things that really, really worked and continue to work to this day. I mean, that history of finding, people and turning, like, John Cena had worked independently, but he wasn't a wrestler of any notoriety. Dave Bautista was not a wrestler of any notoriety. Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, as I said before. And then, I mean, Roman Reigns is the biggest person in wrestling. He was not a wrestler before he walked into WWE.
So do you draw any parallels between, okay, they needed WCW to get to the level they're at today. Do you see any parallels? Do they need someone again like that? Is AEW needed for WWE to get out of their own way? Or do you think WWE's gotten to the level where they're not even thinking about things like that now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that to me, wrestling at its best is it should be a reflection of the society that it exists within. And I think that the way the world works now is people like what they like, and that's what they are attracted to. And there is so much stuff that you don't have to choose. You just go to what you like. That's why, the four of us can sit around here and just yap about wrestling and throw it up on YouTube. And if people like that sort of thing, they'll come and they'll watch this show. I think that WWE presents the product that WWE presents. It's an extremely popular product. It's an extremely profitable product, and this is what we do here. I think that the stuff going on in other companies, whether it's Impact or AEW or GCW or New Japan or all these other spots, like, what's different now than the Monday Night War is that there is room now. You would say that before, but there is room. Like, we're not looking at this when WCW and WWE were competing. There was this feeling of one has to be better than the other. Only one can survive. And I think that there are some people that want that to be true with WWE and AEW, but I don't think that it is. I don't think that the reality of the situation is that at the end of this story, only one of those two companies exist.
I agree completely. I think that is a spotlight of how much healthier the business is right now compared to back then.
Right.
Now you can have those choices.
And you look at, like, the fact that independent shows are on Fight TV and stuff like that, where if you want to watch deathmatch wrestling, if you don't like AEW or WWE or whatever else is going on, and because you just want to watch deathmatch wrestling, you can watch deathmatch wrestling. Or you just want to watch indie shows that have 15 people in the audience, you can watch indie shows that have 15 people in the audience. There are plenty of people that if you want TV studio wrestling, if you're like, enough of these stinking arenas, I'm over it. I want old school TV studio wrestling. Billy Corgan is putting on a product called NWA, and he's giving you TV studio wrestling. Like, it's all, not only are all the archives available now, but all of it is being made new. So no, I don't sit there feeling like, oh man, somebody's got to wake up WWE. Because if you look at the bottom line, like, WWE is not a company that you'd look at and go like, oh, things are bad.
right.
Things are like astronomically good for that company. So yeah. So no, I don't feel that way at all. I think that this is a different scenario. And I think that you're right, that it's a different scenario that puts a spotlight on how healthy wrestling is for wrestling fans.
I agree.
Great point.
And I think that's honestly, it's a good segue into the next topic, which we'll just move on to it because we're already talking about it. The next topic, or the final topic, it's with quality wrestling content like promotions, podcasts, and all that at an all-time high, juxtaposed with lower TV ratings compared to previous eras. Are we really in a wrestling golden age right now?
Yes, we absolutely are. Ratings are down across the board for everyone. People are streaming. People are watching on YouTube. People are watching everywhere. we don't even know how accurate these ratings are, because when I go out wearing my wrestling shirts, I have more people stopping me now than ever. People who I don't know. I'll wear my Brody Lee shirt out, and multiple times I've had ladies stop me saying, "Oh my God, too soon. I loved him." I've never had it happen like it's happening now. So don't trust the ratings with all the streaming, all the YouTube videos. Like, go look at some of the hits on CM Punk videos on AEW when he returned. Look at what those numbers did. That probably did better than the actual show. There's millions of views on what they posted. So I say absolutely yes. I've never seen people, like, I'll be sitting at a poker table and all of a sudden the guy next to me, we just start talking about wrestling.
Well,
So
yeah.
I've never seen it like this.
I think it relates back to what we were just talking about, is the ratings were so high back in the day in the Attitude Era because there weren't as many options, not just on wrestling promotions, but just content in general. There weren't as many television channels. Streaming wasn't around. There was 2 major promotions to watch. And now I feel like people consume differently. It's not destination TV anymore. Now you have your DVRs. Now you can catch up on YouTube. Back then, if you weren't sitting at your TV at 8:00 on a Monday night or had your VCR set to record, you weren't going to see it. You had to be there. So I'm with you. I think we are 100% in a golden age in a different way. Maybe it's not reflected in pulling 5-6 million viewers on a Monday night, but those eyes are out there. I honestly don't think the way the rating system is set up, we're not accounting for, we're not getting a true sense of how many eyes are really seeing this product.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, the ratings conversation is so kind of ridiculous at this point because nobody talks about, like, what are you talking about with rating? Like that's such an antiquated way
Right.
to judge the success. Like the success of a company is the success of a company as a fan is, do you like what they're doing creatively or do you not like what they're doing creatively? Like, do I have a fun time watching this show? That's as fans like us, that's how we judge the show. In terms of a business, you talk about their bottom line. You talk about the money that they make. Like what is the revenue coming in? Right? Like you can't sit there and be like, well, WWE doesn't have as many people watching Raw on USA. And it's like, well, cool. They just got $1 billion from NBC for their archive. So, I feel like they're doing okay. WWE's got like literally one of the biggest YouTube channels in all of YouTube. That means way more than what's the demo like? What's the demo like? I mean, like, it's fun. It's fun to look at the ratings because you can have a week by week comparison and who's doing what and is this week better than last week? Like, I'm not saying we shouldn't look at that, but it's certainly, I don't even think that is part of the conversation when we talk about whether this is a golden era or not, the way it was for like the Attitude Era, because in the Attitude Era it was indicative and it was like one of the few major revenue streams for both companies. It's kind of whatever. And this is what is so important in the Attitude Era. The 2 shows were on head to head. So it really mattered who did what in the ratings because they were on at exactly the same time, going head to head. So, I think that was far more indicative back then. I think that this is a golden era for wrestling fans in the sense that we just have this wealth of content. I think that one of the reasons why you've got people coming up to you and talking to you about wrestling all the time is that the WWE Network and YouTube has made it so that all the wrestling that everybody grew up with is available. So like, it's not just what's on TV right now. It's also all the wrestling that's ever happened. Right. And it's all one thing. I remember like a couple of years ago, it blew my mind. Like I met a bunch of like kids. I think it was at the Barclays Center and they were on some kind of trip or something. And I was like, oh, what's your guys' favorite wrestler? And the first question was now or from before? And I was like, well, what do you mean from before? And they all had favorite wrestlers from the Attitude Era because they'd watched everything on YouTube and on the network. Like it's all kind of one thing. So I think for fans, this is a golden era. I think that when you talk about for the industry, I think that for it to really be a golden era in the industry, I think that there are two. We've had two true golden eras. One was the golden era, the Hulkamania era with Hulk Hogan, and the other was the Attitude Era. And the reason why those were golden eras, not just for the fans, but for the industry, was that you had Hulk Hogan, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock. Those you had those stars that transcended everything. Hogan in his day, Austin and The Rock in their day, as wrestlers, were bigger than any celebrity. If they went on MTV, TRL, they had to shut down Times Square. Like, it was the biggest thing in the world. So I think that is kind of the missing piece of the puzzle, is that while Roman Reigns is a tremendous star, he's still got room to grow. I think that for the industry to truly have a third golden era, somebody would have to come along that was like, that's professional athlete famous, that's LeBron James famous, that has these athletes coming to Raw to take their picture. I think that's what I'm waiting for, and I think we'll get there. I think we went close. I think, honestly, there was a period of time where I was like, Becky Lynch might be that person. Like, this is getting crazy with Becky right now. And who's to say she won't be? But I think it's cool that you look around and you're like, yeah, that we are in a golden era for fans, but that little piece of the puzzle for the industry, I think, is not far away at all.
I think I agree with that. I think we are in a golden era for fans. What do you think it is with fans, though? Because I remember when we've talked about this before, that before a wrestling fan, if you found another wrestling fan, it was like it was your brother. There's people that bonded over becoming wrestling fans. But now it's such a toxic, it almost seems like fandom gets kind of toxic.
It's tribal. There's a lot of tribalism in wrestling today.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the internet too, though.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a lot of things on the internet. I think if you meet a wrestling fan in person, you probably will still bond in that same way. But
Yeah.
It's like a lot of things on the internet that something gets lost in translation, and that happens, and it's not like that wasn't happening before. Like, it wasn't so in your face because we didn't have Twitter and all that, but like, it's not like the message boards.
That's what I was going to say.
Were a friendly place back in the day. It's not like, and it's not like you didn't have WCW, WWE tribalism going on like crazy on the internet. It was just, as a fan, you had to dig through stuff and find the message boards and get in there. So, I think there is a thing where there are more, and as more information becomes available, there are more and more fans that, think that they're an expert, not just on what they're seeing on TV, but, the business as a whole, which is, kind of ridiculous. But I think that part is just the internet becoming more of a day-to-day part of people's lives that works for wrestling. I'm sure, Marvel Twitter is just a toxic waste dump.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably true. We just know the wrestling one because we follow it. If we were
Exactly.
in deep with that, we'd probably see the same stuff over there. That's an excellent point. I remember back in the day, there were people pretending to be Goldust on the AOL message boards.
Oh my God, what a bunch of weirdos. What a bunch of weirdos.
So, like you had mentioned, Sneed, in the question about podcasts, and I feel like that's a new thing. Talking about it being a golden age for the fans, that's something that we've really never had before, ever. Every now and then you'd get like a shoot interview that you would hear someone give, but like as far as like something to wrestle, and these podcasts where you have insiders telling these behind the scenes stories of the wrestling we grew up with, I feel like that has really added to the fandom of hearing right from the horse's mouth from these guys. But do you think having those podcasts kind of, for lack of a better term, expose the business? Do you think stuff like that hurts the potential of a megastar. Do you think like that mainstream, not the hardcore fans, but maybe that casual viewer doesn't buy in as much now with stuff like that because kayfabe isn't as prevalent as it was when we had those big stars?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because I seen this interview today from Sports Illustrated with Becky Lynch. And she's over there and she's like, yup, me and Charlotte don't like each other. And it makes it real tough to get in the ring together. And I don't know what's going to happen. But Survivor Series is a week from Sunday. And everybody's like, oh, it's really on. This is for real. And I'm like, come on. Kayfabe is alive and well. It never went anywhere. I think that, but that's why I brought up Becky Lynch before. Like I've talked about this on my podcast, that there is this new kayfabe where I think performers have to be aware of the level to which fans think they know what's going on, and they have to play into that. And I think that that's what separates good from great, when you still have people that are using the internet to make people on the internet question what's real and what's not real. And I think that that's very possible. I think we've seen it done more times than people even realize. And it's my favorite thing in the world when it happens.
We've talked about that on the show before, how kayfabe isn't dead, it's changed. There now, like, you want to see those, the way you operate your Twitter, the way all of those little things now, giving shoot interviews in the press, like that's how you keep the kayfabe. Like
the internet now, like the smart fans, they go like this. They go, I don't know, man. The fans are booing Cody, but he's never going to turn heel. He said he wasn't. And it's like, oh, you're right. Yeah, he did say that. Yeah,
exactly.
I think we might have said that once or twice over here.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what he would say. Like, he's a wrestler. He's grew up in it his whole life. Like, how are you? Like, come on.
Oh, yeah.
It's
I forgot.
so true, man.
He went on TV and said that. Oh, you're right. He must really mean.
That's so true.
Oh man,
that's great.
Yeah, he'll never turn heel.
He said it.
He said it.
Roads to the top. Must
like,
be true.
Yeah,
well, and that's a reality show. So
it's not a reality show. Like, hello.
That's great.
Oh man. Well, does anybody have anything to throw in there before we wrap it up?
No, I
you
think
nailed
that's
it.
All right, Sam, do me a favor, plug all of your stuff so everybody knows where to find you.
Well, my podcast is Not Sam Wrestling. You could check that out wherever you get podcasts. I also have a Not Sam Wrestling YouTube channel that's just wrestling content. Go check that out. And I mean, if you like getting into the weeds, I think, I don't know if you guys have seen the Ultimate Show that we do, but I feel like it's something that, like, fans, it's unbelievable that it exists, but it's me, Matt Camp, Ryan Popola, and then sometimes a fourth guest, sometimes not. But we fantasy book an ultimate show surrounding a pay-per-view. So I think we didn't do one. I think the last one we did was SummerSlam. We're going to do another one for Survivor Series, but they come out those pay-per-view weekends, but they're all up on Peacock. So, I could recommend that you guys that are watching this, if you enjoyed this, I think you'll really like the Ultimate Show that we do on Peacock.
We'll definitely check that out.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you for coming on, man. Thank you to Chad, Tom, for a year of awesome shows.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
Congratulations, by the way, to you guys. Congratulations on that. That's a big deal.
Thank you so much,
you.
man. It means a lot. This show means a lot on a lot of different levels for all of us. So it is a big accomplishment. And I'm glad to have had to share the time with you guys. So
yeah, man.
Yeah,
awesome.
Love it. Look forward to it every week.
Absolutely, man. Well, we're going to wrap it up. That was a
What
fun episode.
a guest to have for a year.
Dude. Thanks so much for coming
Sam
on,
Roberts.
man.
Without Sam, do we have this podcast? He influenced so many of us. So thank you, Sam.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the other thing with podcasts is that everybody's figuring out that my job is like really easy. That anybody can do it. So yeah.
Hey, Tom, get some stuff in real quick. We got a second.
Turnbuckle sessions every Wednesday.
That's it. Court is dismissed.